bases dropped on another week of Soccer Down here. There's plenty to jump into in the world of silly season MLS teams getting ready for 2020, and it feels like players all over the world are being linked to MLS at the moment, along with some MLS players being linked to moves all over the world. It's that time of year, but it really does feel like this is a bit of a tipping point with different types of moves and different levels of moves being talked about. It feels like a different kind of silly season now. The CBA negotiations could either slow that process down or put it off to another window. We'll have to wait and see, but it's a very interesting time when you're looking at soccer in the U.S. and specifically in Major League Soccer. Jason Longshore, John Nelson here with you this morning. And, John, let's just get caught up on kind of where everybody stands. MLSsoccer.com did a pretty good update of just where everything sits at the moment. You know, moves that have been made, biggest move, biggest question. Let's start with the biggest questions for each team, because that's kind of what the silly season's all about. How are you going to answer these questions that each team has? For Atlanta, Tom Bogert says that the biggest question is the future of Julian Gressel. It's a valid point because, you know, we've been talking about it. It feels like everybody I've talked to, whether it's a question about rumors with Ezequiel Barco drawing interest from Europe, or what happens to Tito Villalba, or how does the shape look, a lot of it keeps coming back to, you know, what happens with Julian Gressel, because his versatility could put him in a bunch of these different positions depending on other moves that happen. But if he's not there, then that changes the paradigm for everything else. So it's a really interesting bit of potential dominoes that could fall and affect others.
But then let me ask you this, and how Bogert phrases it. He refers to it as a contract dispute.
Is that
accurate?
No, that's a little much. I don't call it a dispute. I mean, he's under contract for 2020. His contract is up at the end of 2020 after his option has been picked up. You have to sign him to a new deal. I mean, it's just where it stands. Now, could it become a dispute? I think it becomes a dispute if conversations are had about, hey, I'm not coming into training camp until we get a new deal. That's the kind of level that it goes to a dispute, and that hasn't been said yet. So that's where I'm at with it. I mean, you know, it's a fluid situation. It's also a fluid definition of how you want to put it.
And for me, I mean, a lot of these elements have to do with the CBA and where it stands and what kind of room you're going to have and what's added, and, you know, what the next level is for a CBA. When I saw contract dispute, I'm like, no, that's, I mean, it's, you have the individual sitting there and saying things, but I don't view this as a dispute. To your point, I think that if he continues and then all of a sudden, you know, he's not there, then it turns into a dispute. Right now, it's just the player sitting there and saying things publicly about how he views things when it comes to his contract.
Well, to be fair to Bogert, he says when he's talking about the Gressel part, he doesn't use the word dispute. He uses it afterwards, and maybe it's just a choice of a word there. I'm not putting as much stock into it, but I don't think you can really fairly say that the CBA has no effect on it. The CBA has an effect, and it has an effect on this because Gressel and his new contract would not just be a typical, okay, he's on a TAM deal and he's going to be on a bigger TAM deal, or he's on a less than max contract number and he's going to stay less than max. When you're going from less than max to a move that would require TAM or GAM to not be counted as a designated player, that's where the CBA part can get interesting. And I do wonder, with that factoring into it, what those CBA negotiations are around these types of situations, around these types of designated player /TAM/GAM, what this is going to look like going forward in the CBA. So
yeah,
we'll have to wait and see. there was a great piece by Jeff Carlisle over at ESPN kind of outlining some of the different issues with the CBA negotiations and really what both sides are looking for. A lot of what the players are looking for revolves around the work environment, the way things are handled. They don't like the idea of TAM at all. They don't like the idea of allocation money at all. They don't want that stuff in there. They want it to be simple. That would have an effect on these types of moves. So, who knows at this point? Julian Gressel's going to get a raise. I mean, I think that's an obvious way to put this. He's going to get a raise from his rookie deal. It's not craziness that he was on a low rookie deal and he has outperformed it and he hasn't gotten that raise yet. He's going into the last year of the deal. That's where you're at right now. So that's where Atlanta United's at. And I do feel like questions, holes, lineups, all of that, a lot of it is going to depend on what happens with Julian Gressel. And long term, are you able to get him under a new deal? Are you able to make everything happy? Are you able to plan for him long term? Or not, and then you have to look at different ways of building your squad. Let's move on to Chicago. So for them, the biggest question, I mean, I agree, it's everywhere.
Yes.
It's just everything. I mean, the biggest question is the whole team, because who's going to be in charge? You're bringing back your defense that wasn't very good to begin with. You've lost anybody who was exciting in the way of scoring goals or creating goals, with the exception of maybe CJ Sapong and Frankowski. You could have Jordy Mihailovic head to Germany. He's training with Nuremberg. Could he stay? It's possible. So for Chicago, I mean, there's too many questions to zero in on one. It's first, for me, who's going to be manager? Second, who's going to be the star? Because they've got to have a star moving back to Soldier Field.
Yeah, who are you going to wrap yourselves around? Who's going to win the presser? Who's going to be on the billboards? Who's going to have the kit on? Who's going to have the scarf around his neck in fancy street clothes? Who's going to be that individual? B, A, who's going to be on the touchline? What's the philosophy? Who's he going to bring in? Yeah, so everywhere, everything. I've got a lot of questions for a stalagmite, stalactite. Yes, I do.
I'm going to push back on one thing you said, because I think it comes up a lot, and it's something that isn't always the case with every team. Now, I don't know what Chicago's going to be, because we have a ton of different questions in general, but it's not always the job of the manager to set the philosophy. In the best situation, the manager doesn't set the philosophy, the club does, and the manager's hired because he fits that philosophy. That's something MLS teams need to move to more and more and more. And every top team needs to, but especially MLS teams that don't have identities. If it's all about, well, okay, now we've got a manager who plays like Jose Mourinho. Okay, now we've hired a manager who plays like Pep Guardiola. Well, then you've just screwed up a whole year of transition, because you can't go from one to the other just overnight, because your squad's not built that way. Your club has to have an identity and a philosophy from day one that is independent of the manager. And it's something that I think Atlanta United did really well. That's something that LAFC, I think, is doing really well. Now, Bob Bradley, of course, has an impact on that. Tata Martino had an impact on it. That was different than Frank de Boer. The manager has a personality, but they can't set the philosophy, because when they go, that philosophy goes with them. And then you're starting from scratch. And that's not how this should work. It's not. I mean, look at Manchester United as the prime example of a club that has lost its philosophy. Tell me similarities between David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Like, there's not many. There's just not. Because the club has completely lost its way when Sir Alex Ferguson retired. You can't be that. You have to have your philosophy and your way you play. Barcelona has done a good job of that. Now, have they drifted from it at times over the years? Sure, because every manager brings their personality to it. But Chicago leadership has to create a philosophy that has nothing to do with the manager. That's why the Miami situation, with them not having a manager yet, it shouldn't be catastrophic, Maybe it is, but I'm also thinking that Miami, with the people that are there, one, Paul McDonough has been through this before. He's seen a club that hasn't set a philosophy like Orlando and what happened, and he was involved with that at day one. He's seen a club that has set a philosophy, and it's worked, and it's survived a managerial change in Atlanta. He probably has a pretty good idea, along with a guy like David Beckham, who has a very clear idea of the way he enjoys his football. You have people to create a philosophy. You're going to hire a manager who fits it. That's the key. And Miami, the longer you wait, that next step of personality within the philosophy is a problem. But you are starting from scratch. So Miami has a different scenario right now. Chicago has a bunch of pieces. They don't have an organized philosophy, and they don't have a manager to do anything with any of it right now. So that's where you're at with Chicago, and that's been the case. I mean, Veljko Paunovic was there for a few years now. He didn't really create or add to a philosophy. Nelson Rodriguez hasn't created a philosophy. They don't have one from day one. I mean, you go all the way back. You look at Chicago Fire teams over the years. Other than the logo on it, which is going to be different now, so you've even lost that identity, there's not much tying it together. There just isn't. And that's something that MLS clubs need to do more and more. It's not about the manager to come in and create that philosophy. The club has to have a philosophy. The manager accentuates it and adds his own elements to it and adds his own personality to it. Clubs got to have their own philosophy, and that's what the best clubs around the world do. Let's move on to Cincinnati with their biggest question. So, philosophy is part of it. I mean, Gerard Nijkamp is there now as the GM. Ron Jans is your manager. I think the two of them are on the same page with the way they want this team to play and what they want to do. Okay, you just lost a year in building it because you didn't do this from day one. But it feels like now Cincinnati knows where they want to go. But now they have to make some moves, and you've got a bunch of guys under contract that you're kind of stuck to a degree. You can make a few moves here and there, and they have. But you kind of have to just get through another year and really ingrain your philosophy before anything else matters too much for Cincinnati.
Yeah, for me, it's with all of those contracts that you're saddled with. And you saw toward the end of the year what Ron Jans wanted to do. And you saw some baby steps somewhat from FC Cincinnati under Jans. But, I mean, for me, now you're looking at when you brought in, when you selected, not brought in, but selected Harris Medunjanin. Now, with him as a desired piece, can you agree on something? And then with the pieces that you have that you're stuck with, and then possibly adding in Harris Medunjanin, how does that integrate? So for me, yeah, it's just you've got another year in 2020 that you just kind of have to get through before you can kind of take the straight jacket off, I guess is probably what I was looking for before you can start chasing after players.
But they have what they want to do, and that came in when Jans and Nijkamp came in last year. That's not the issue. So, I mean, does Medunjanin, can he help get them where they want to go? They know where they're going, and Medunjanin fits that. Can they get him under contract is going to be the thing. Can you find a number that makes sense? He would fit. I mean, this is going to be a team that will be, I think, very Dutch-minded, very possession-based, a 4-3-3. Medunjanin in that role, if you get somebody paired up with him who can do the defensive work for him, and they have those guys on the roster, I think he can really lift that team in the direction that they're already going. That's the thing, is they didn't have that identity day one. Alan Koch was all over the place in his teams. Now you have consistency. But the problem is you're in year two. You have a bunch of guys who were under contract for multiple years that didn't really, that don't fit what you're doing now because it's different than what you were doing when they were signed. And that's the problem. And that's where Cincinnati's going to struggle a little bit this year. They can be better, and I think they will, but they're not going to be as good as they can be, I think, until 21. I think it's going to take another year to get through stuff. Colorado, I like what they've been doing in the offseason. I don't think Colorado's ever going to be a team that's going to blow the doors off with their spending, but you don't have to be good in this league. If you can develop players but also go out and identify the right guys to bring in, you can be good. And right now you're going into a season with a back line of Lalas Abubakar, who was good for you last year, Austin Trusty, who has a ton of promise, Vines on the left and Rosenberry on the right. That's a good back line in this league. You go into it with a midfield of Price, Wilson, Acosta, really good. Kai Kamara can score goals in this league. Jonathan Lewis, Diego Rubio can bring you some magic out on the flanks. This is a good squad. Is it a spectacular squad? No. They played really well once they kind of got back to basics, first with Connor Casey and then Robin Fraser. They have 3 open designated player slots, too.
That's what I was going to say.
That's the thing. But you know they're not going to go out and spend in the way that some other teams are going to use those DP slots. But you look at this team, there's not any obvious holes. There's not anybody that you're like, all right, we have to replace this. This isn't going to work. It's where do you want to upgrade? And that's going to be the question for Colorado. I think they're good. I think they're a playoff team for next year.
Then if they're a playoff team for next year, who isn't at the moment? Because I always
the whole list right now. No, not yet. No, not yet. I don't know who it is yet. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Colorado. Colorado is a playoff team next year, in my opinion. I'm not predicting the 1 through 7 yet. I'm saying they're a playoff team. They're a playoff level team. That's the point. Can they get better with designated players? Yes.
Yes.
But where and who are they going to spend it on?
Right. And that was the question I was going to ask. It's like, okay, so you have 3 open slots, but with what you've been able to do in bringing in and solidifying Abubakar, bringing in Trusty, bringing in more to help you out here, you don't have to open the wallet and turn it upside down and sit there and bring in 3 DPs. It's just, all right, how do we strategically use a DP slot? And I'm going to take it one at a time because, like I said, like you went through what they're looking for or looking like with a starting 11. So for me, it's taking it one at a time and being pragmatic about it and trying to figure out, okay, how can we augment what we have and not just completely and totally just blowing up your wallet and doing something. So there's prudence here that you've already seen from Colorado. How do they follow it up with the possibility of adding DPs?
But you're not just adding DPs here either, because you have young players who are playing significant minutes in Abubakar, Trusty, Vines, Kellen Acosta, Rubio, and Lewis. You don't want to sign somebody that's going to put those guys on the bench because those are guys that you can play, they can win games for you, they can develop, and they're assets that you can sell. So if you're looking at places to, upgrade outside of that, Kai Kamara is still scoring goals, but do you feel like it's time to go get an even better striker? Maybe, and that would make sense for a designated player spot, and you could go younger on one and give him some time because Kamara, I think, can still score goals for you, so you don't have to rush somebody into the lineup straight away. Do you feel like maybe you can go get a young designated player in the holding midfield for Price or Wilson? Yeah, I think that would make sense. Those are really the only 2 spots that I'm looking at right now. I don't want to take playing time away from the young guys who are getting that time because those are your potential assets for making money down the road. And they're playing well, so there's no need to change anything there. Colorado's in a really good spot, and they've done it pretty quickly. And this is what Chicago should be looking at, is Colorado got back to basics. They've built a team based around what they can do. Now, Chicago's going to spend more money than they have to. They're in a different situation. But Colorado went from being a very, very bad team to a very good team in a few months with good management, with simplicity, and with trusting in young players. And that's something Chicago really hasn't done at all. They've been maybe the worst in the league at that. So Colorado now, you're talking about some really good cherries on top that you can sign if you so choose, and you don't have to rush into anything. You can take this roster into the season and have the expectation of being a playoff team. If you add anything to it, one, you do run the risk of changing the chemistry, and that's always something you have to worry about. But
Right.
two, you could reach even higher levels if you go and make the right signings. So Colorado's in a great spot, and I think what they did from when we saw them at Mercedes-Benz early in the 2019 season until now is one of the best transformations that we've seen in MLS in a short period of time for a team that was an absolute dumpster fire to turn into a team that you look going into the next season, yeah, they should make the playoffs. That's great work by that front office and a great build that they've been able to do. Let's talk about Columbus before we take a break. The Crew are another one that are building, I think still building a little bit after Caleb Porter came in last year. They didn't really get much of an offseason to do things with last year because of the ownership change, because of just the way things fell. They're building a stadium, so that's taking away a lot of the focus. But you're talking about a Columbus team that has added Darlington Nagbe, that added during the season Mokhtar and Diaz out wide. Pedro Santos right now would slot in as your number 10, but the talk has been that they're going to go out and get a number 10 to replace Higuain. Santos did that really well last year, so I don't think you have to rush it. You're going to have to figure out what your midfield looks like. And, is it Trapp? Is it Artur with Nagbe? I don't know. And it's been mixed signals. Your back line, it's a good one. You're getting Valenzuela back, who had a knee injury in preseason last year, one of the top young left backs in the league. Harrison Offal is still one of the better right backs in the league. Jonathan Mensah has been steady. Abubakar Keita is an up-and-coming center back who was at the U20 World Cup for the U.S. Eloy Room, good signing. You handled the loss of Zach Steffen really well. This is a team in Columbus that late in the season looked like a playoff team. And I think you look at that lineup, and it looks like a playoff team kind of 11 for the Columbus Crew. My question is, if they go out and get a number 10, if that's where they're going to spend, and that's what they've said, then what with Mokhtar, Santos, Diaz? And I'm guessing it would be Mokhtar or Santos who would be the odd man out, and either be an option off the bench or a player like Pedro Santos. Maybe you try to move on in the January window. But you've got to make sure if you go out and spend that money on a number 10 that you're upgrading from what you had at the end of the season, which was very good.
And, yeah, I mean, for me, we've seen what Columbus wants to do early on. And for me, once again, it goes back to the same point that you were talking about Colorado. You're seeing a build. Then if you're going to bring in pieces, for me, the concern is, okay, how do you are you augmenting? Are you bettering what you have? Or do you run the risk of what chemistry is there, upsetting that and trying to have to rebuild from the transactions that you want to bring in otherwise? That for me, so I guess Columbus along the same lines as Colorado for me, just different holes that they would need to fill or that they may be looking to fill.
Well, I mean, Columbus has said that they want to go out and replace Higuain. They want a number 10. So it's a different conversation because they've put that out there, and they added Darlington Nagbe, which was a big move. So that creates a couple trickle downs if you're talking about what happens at the number 10 spot, because you've got to put Santos somewhere. You've got to potentially move Mokhtar. I don't think you're moving Diaz. I think Diaz is a consistent guy on the right side. And you've got to you're breaking up what has been the midfield pairing of Trapp and Artur to fit Nagbe into it. Unless you're going to try to play the three of them together, then you're not looking for a number 10, and you're still sitting somebody between Mokhtar and Pedro Santos. I think it's a little different because of what you've said you're going to do here and what you've already done in bringing in a Darlington Nagbe, because you have a couple guys that are now on the block. I don't think you're going to keep Trapp and Artur. and both have been rumored to be in the shop window. Trapp hasn't generated interest. He could go to Europe because he has the EU passport. Artur, could he generate interest around the league? I would think so, as a number 8, as a box-to-box midfielder. But who's going to go in and make the trade for Columbus? And are they going to trade a player, or are they going to trade assets? And then what does Columbus do with the assets? I think both teams are in a really good spot, and they don't have to rush anything in this window. They don't have to go out and make a huge signing. There's a bunch of teams that are in that spot. Columbus and Colorado don't have to, but they have to be careful in what they do because they're on the right road, and they don't want to deviate from that. And whatever signing they make, there's always that next move. And that's the one. Nagbe has created a logjam at a position by adding him. Okay, how are you going to solve that? If you go out and get a number 10, you're creating another one. How are you going to solve that? Same for Colorado when we went through that lineup. You don't want to sit any of your young guys who are playing and developing and playing well. If you go get somebody, who are they going to replace, and how do you solve that issue? Those are the moves. Now, I think most teams in the league need to upgrade their depth, and both of these teams do. But that's a very different conversation than starters. When you're judging if a team's a playoff team or not, you're mostly looking at the starting lineup. And both of those teams in Colorado and Columbus are in a good spot. They can go add depth and they can get better. But if they go add another starter, how do you handle the domino effect of moves that will happen? And that's what we'll have to wait and see. We're going to take a quick break. Shiva's got a question on the board. We'll get to that after the commercials, and we'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Catching up on MLS after the holiday break. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving with friends and family. SDH is back for another week during MLS silly season, and this is kind of the opportunity to reset a little bit. There's still the re-entry draft, stage 2, where you're picking up players' rights. That'll be this week, but we're taking today to kind of run through each team and where things stand right now at the beginning of the really silly portion of the offseason. So Shiva had a question when we were talking philosophy at the beginning of this. Shiva asked, which player of Atlanta United do you think will benefit the most from Frank de Boer as his coach? For
me, I was thinking someone like Miles. because of what we've seen, the growth for Miles at the back, the upside that you see in someone like Miles, being able to learn from someone who's been there, who's grown into a sport, who's been a part of titles and that. So that Miles was literally the first person that popped into my head.
I think Miles is one. I think George Campbell is one who, young players are going to benefit from Frank DeBoer as the manager because he has no problem playing young guys. George Bello is another one because you're talking about a manager in DeBoer who came through the Ajax system as a player and a manager, and that's a club where if you're good enough, you're old enough, and you're going to play. So young players are going to get that opportunity here. I think Campbell and Bello are the two that could end up developing the most under Frank DeBoer and benefiting from his presence the most when all is said and done. Miles had the door opened for him by DeBoer because he wasn't part of the regular group with Tata Martino, and he became part of that very quickly with Frank DeBoer. I think Bello and Campbell have that potential too, and they're going to get the opportunities if their performances are there. Bello, I think, will be the left back to start the season, and Campbell, I think, if his performances are good, he's going to get the opportunity to show you more, and that's what you want in a club that is looking at things like Atlanta United. Yes, you're going to go out and spend money. Yes, you're going to go bring in players that are going to cost you, but you're also looking at developing players and selling them and making money. This is a business, and that's part of it. And the only way you develop young players is by playing them. So just like we talked about with Colorado, with these young guys that are playing, you don't want to take that time away. Frank DeBoer's not going to take that time away if guys are performing. And that opens the door for a Campbell, a Bello. It opened it for Robinson. It's big. And I think that's going to be the ultimate impact that DeBoer has on this club, is being maybe a little more willing than Tata Martino was to play young players more. Now, the play has to be there. Everything associated with it, the responsibility, the consistency, all of that has to be there. But the door's open if you go in and take it. And we saw Robinson do that this year. Bello has that potential. I think he would have last year if he hadn't been injured. And Campbell will have it too. So keep an eye on young guys like that. I think that's where DeBoer's impact will be felt the strongest. Let's move on to another team that develops young players and plays them and had success doing that last year, and it was FC Dallas. They added Fafa Pico, which was a bit of a surprise. There's a lot of different rumors about players that Dallas is looking to bring in. There's a couple from Palmeiras in Brazil. We'll get to that in a little bit later segment on the show. They're also linked to a French winger, Romain Filipito. But they have a good core of young talent that is going to keep getting minutes. Where they could be looking at questions and stuff, Bogert says, do they have enough top-end talent to take them over the top? I mean, Dallas isn't necessarily going to be a team that's going to go out and spend on top-end talent. So I don't know if that question definitely applies here to Dallas. I look at Dallas, and I think they have a very good 11. And you add Pico, you potentially add more from Brazil. If this winger comes in, okay, fine. You've got options out on the wing. I think the question for Luchi Gonzalez is going to be, can you find the right combination to get the best play out of this group? Because you have a lot of options. The other one would be, I think they need one more center back who's ready to play. Because Hedges and Ziegler's a little bit older. The depth there would be the question mark for me when you look at Dallas. You have Bresson, you have Callum Montgomery as depth pieces at center back. you've got good depth most everywhere else on the field. That's the spot that you might want to upgrade at. Everything else, you're in a pretty good spot right now.
What about folks from North Texas filling in some of the holes for depth?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you can do that. And you're also you're relying on guys who are untested. And if that's where you are as a club, and I think Dallas is there, fine, you have bodies, but that's untested. And if Ziegler got hurt, and let's say Bresson, who's a guy who I think can step in and play, is hurt, which happens, then you're turning to Callum Montgomery, who is unproven, or you're turning to somebody from North Texas last year who's unproven. Dallas feels like they're further along than that, and they have to be thinking, we can win the West. We have the talent to win the West. One injury should not be able to derail that, but you've got to have guys who can step in those moments. That's the balance between the playing guys who are young but have shown enough and throwing guys into a situation that maybe they're not ready for. Knowing which situation a player is in. That's the hardest part of all of this. And that's where Luchi Gonzalez, that's where Frank DeBoer, that's where any manager in this league is going to really earn their money, knowing when the time is right to turn to a young player who hasn't played in these moments. We'll see. We'll see if Luchi gets that right. I think he could probably use one more trusted defender. That's probably it for me when you look at Dallas. I think they're pretty good otherwise. And they're not a team that's going to go out and get top-end talent. So I don't even know if that comes into play with an FC Dallas.
Yeah, for me, I've always perceived FC Dallas as a side that likes to develop from within and then fill in the holes with strategic pickups and not spending over the top to bring in that big name at whatever place you want to put them in. I've always thought of them as a builder from the bottom of their academy chain and working their way up that way, as opposed to bringing in someone from the outside to be a part and parcel to the whole thing.
They're in a better spot with bringing those players through because of North Texas than they were before, but there's still a jump. USL League One to MLS is not close in terms of quality. A USL Championship is closer, but it's still not that close. So turning to a player like that in a key moment, it's risky, and you have to make sure you have your evaluation correct, and that's what Luchi Gonzalez, especially in his role, is getting paid to do. DC United's up next. They have a lot of questions with Luciano Acosta gone, with Wayne Rooney gone, potentially Lucas Rodriguez not back. What does this group look like in 2020? Right now, I have no idea, because you're looking at a team that would be relying on Ola Kamara up top, Ulisses Segura, Paul Areola, Yamil Assad as your attacking midfield. Holding midfield's good. Russell Canals, Junior Moreno. Backline, questions on the outside with O'Neal Fisher coming back. Joseph Mora on the other side. Steve Birnbaum, you're fine. Donovan Pines, young. I think he has a ton of potential, but he's still raw. Bill Hamid, it sounds like will be back, but it's not a definite yet. Beyond that, you have no depth. So for DC, they're in a different spot. They're closer to a Chicago in that you look at this team right now, and they are nowhere near a playoff team, and they're expected to be that. You know, Colorado, Columbus are in good spots, teams that look like they can qualify for the playoffs. Cool. You're happy where you're at. DC, you cannot be happy with this group at all. And what do you do to change it? Who are you going to go get? Because I think they need a big name, and I think they need big impact. And they don't have that in this group right now at all. They have nobody that scares you.
So when you started discussing DC and everything that they don't have, for my incredibly expert analysis for DC United in 2020, all I could do was kind of shrug my shoulders and put my palms up in the air and sit there and go, I have no earthly idea, because of all of the holes that they have and how they may want to try to fill them. So I'm a shrugged shoulders when it comes to DC United right now.
They've got to be bold in the transfer market, and it's just so hard to read what they're going to do and what they're able to do and where their evaluation is. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look like next year, but they're one that was a playoff team in 19 that right now does not look like a playoff team in 20. Houston Dynamo are a team trying to get back to the playoffs. Tab Ramos is there. You would expect him to be a manager who is comfortable playing young talent, coming from the U20 program with the U.S. national team. You've added Victor Cabrera to your back line. I think that's a good move, trading Romel Kyoto, who just never seemed to live up to all the potential in Houston. You've added Darwin Quintero. You've got potential, leaving from Mauro Manotas, from Albert Ellis. Those are two guys who are going to draw interest in the transfer market, and both could net large returns, which could give Tab Ramos and his front office some resources to work with. If you're not a big market team, if you're not spending big money, that's how you find big money, is finding talent and selling it for large amounts. Well, then you have big money that comes into your pocket. So how do they handle this whole situation? Because they need to get back to the playoffs. Tab Ramos needs to have resources to work with to potentially get this team there. They added Zarek Valentin as well. They've made really good moves so far. I mean, you're looking at a team on paper that is borderline playoff team right now. I think defensively there's still some questions. And if you want to go out and spend at the moment with what you're working with, not big money, maybe you're looking at getting better on the back line. But this is a quality team at the moment. You have guys who scare you in Manotas and Ellis and Quintero. This is a team that on paper can get to the playoffs. They're very thin, though, and that's always been the story for the Dynamo. Their academy is not where it should be in developing that young talent, that next generation coming through, so they're going to have to go find some of that to back up these guys. I mean, you're right now relying on 35-year-old Boniek Garcia to play a lot of minutes, and he's done that in year 34 and in year 33 and in year 32, and he's still going strong, but at some point that doesn't continue. Who's going to be the guy behind him to give him some breaks? Don't really know yet.
What's the latest on the desires of Manotas and Ellis to want to hang around?
Well, they haven't said anything, so there is no update on that. I mean, that's where it stands. The window's not open, so there's not much that is going to be said about it. Manotas hasn't been as vocal as Ellis. Ellis said he wants to be here this year because he wants to play out his deal. That's a whole different conversation. You can't allow that to happen if you're Houston Dynamo. He doesn't want to sign a new deal, and he shouldn't at this point. He should go test himself elsewhere. Okay, you make the move now, and you move on. Manotas, if the money's right, you have Christian Ramirez, who I think can start in this league and give you the production like Mauro Manotas. I think Christian Ramirez is that good of a player. You have Ronaldo Pena behind him. You have Michael Salazar there too. You have options up top. You can afford to move on from Mauro Manotas. You have Tomas Martinez, who can play in the middle of the park and be a playmaker. And with the talent of a Quintero and a Memo Rodriguez, when he's healthy around him, you're not asking Tomas Martinez to be a game breaker. You're asking him to be a good player, and he can do that for you. This is a good base at the moment, and you've also got a base that can handle moving Ellis and Manotas. You need a goalkeeper, and that's going to be the biggest thing at the moment if you're the Houston Dynamo, is going out and getting a starting goalkeeper. Because right now you've moved on from Joe Willis. You have Michael Nelson, completely unproven. If he's ready to go, cool, it's risky. I think you need a proven goalkeeper with where this team is right now because they can be a playoff team.
And, for me, the goalkeeper was the other question that I had for you was, all right, are they right now with what they have in house? I
think of
too
course
sold.
They're looking. They have one goalkeeper on the roster. Of course they're looking.
Right.
And they're not, nobody's coming out and saying, I don't think anybody's actually coming out and saying anything. Christian Dyer said what the Red Bulls are reportedly saying, but nobody's coming out and saying, like, we're looking at X, we're looking at Y, we're looking at Z. It's nobody's doing that right now. So that question, I can shrug my shoulders, put my palms in the air, and I have no answer. But you have one goalkeeper on the roster, you're going out and looking for goalkeepers. And I think you're looking for a starter because this is a team that should be looking at getting into the playoffs with what they have rather than, we can play Nelson and give him that experience. And if he's good, great. If he's not, then that's okay too. I think they're better than that. So they're going to need a better goalkeeper to get them where they can go. LAFC obviously need that kind of goalkeeper, and Tyler Miller might not be back. So if it's Miller coming back or if it's another goalkeeper, LAFC has to go get that. Because Cisniega, I do not think is the goalkeeper that they can rely on to win MLS Cup, and that's their expectation. I think their right back situation is one that they have to upgrade. Tristan Blackman is a good defender. He's not an MLS Cup winning right back, in my opinion. The rest of the back line can do that. You added Diego Palacios, who we really didn't see last season, but was a very highly regarded left back that you got instead of Barcelona getting, which was one of the crazier moves during the summer window. So he slots in as your starter on the left. You have Zimmerman, you have Segura. You lost Beitashour. It's Blackman right now. I think you can upgrade there. There's always the question about how this midfield works without a true defensive number 6. It's been very good, but do you need one of those in certain spots to get you over the hump? I think you do. But that's going to be a challenge for Bob Bradley because he wants to play with Atuesta, with Kay, with Blessing. He wants to play with 3 guys who can all do similar things and not have to sacrifice the ability to go forward to play a defensive number 6. But as we saw in the postseason, you get into some moments where you need somebody who can do that for you. I don't think you have that in this group. So can you get somebody who is willing to do that sometimes? And a guy who's willing to maybe only start 10, 15 times a year. Maybe less than that. It's tough. It's probably a veteran that's going to slot into that kind of role. Up front, Diego Rossi is the rumored sale, drawing big interest from Fiorentina during the last window. If he goes, who do you bring in? Because they are linked to quite a few different big-name players. Makes a lot of sense. Also, you're going to have Brian Rodriguez slot into this starting lineup, and we've seen what Brian Rodriguez has done so far. Is he just your replacement for Diego Rossi, which is what it looked like when he was brought in? Could be. Up top, do you move Vela into that number 9 role where he has not been as effective? He has not looked as good there. He looked better out on the wing. Do you go with Diamande as your number 9 all the time? I don't know. I think Rossi's gone from LAFC. I think then they have to make the decision on how you use that money and that spot because you'll have a designated player spot. Do you go out and get a forward and just drop Rodriguez into the Diego Rossi spot on the wing and keep everything as it is? Then you could potentially move on from Diamande. Or do you use that designated player spot somewhere different? Do you use it on a right back? Do you use it on a goalkeeper? All those things are in play for a team that is this close to being an MLS Cup winner. But they need those finishing touches to get there.
For me, I was looking at keeper because I do remember some matches where Cisniega started And Bob Bradley was asked about Cisniega, and he was less than pleased in those game by game.
Cisniega's not your guy. I don't think anybody's saying that. Your guy was Tyler Miller, and if he's not there, then you need another guy. It's not Cisniega. He's not your starter in 34 games next year.
So, yeah, for me, it was my number one location was keeper and figuring out what they were going to do there. And I know that there's a new player that has been linked to LAFC. But, yeah, I with you, think that Rossi's out the door, and then just trying to figure out how you're going to arrange things after Rossi is gone is the other question for me with LAFC.
All right, we're going to take a break. Any questions? Throw them our way on Twitter at SoccerDown here. If you have overreactions on an Overreaction Monday, we will take them. But we're going to take a quick break, come back, hit the other team in LA, and wrap up hour number one as we run through where MLS stands the beginning of December and really at the beginning of silly season and all the madness that is to come with the upcoming transfer window. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Wrapping up hour number one of SDH, December 2nd. Where does everything stand in MLS? We've hit one half of Los Angeles. Let's hit the other one now with the Galaxy because they've got huge question marks going into 2020. The biggest one is who's going to score all the goals because Zlatan Ibrahimovic did that. He won't be doing that going forward. Is it going to be Edinson Cavani? Is it going to be one of about 20 other big names that have been linked to the LA Galaxy? That part we'll have to wait and see. And that's obviously the biggest question when it comes to the Galaxy. What other questions are there for you when you look at the LA Galaxy, John?
Well, yeah, for me, obviously scoring and defense. And I don't know if that's really two good things that you need to look at when it comes to 2020. I mean, yeah, you're losing Zlatan. Yes, you're having the Pavone deal extended. Who's going to help in putting the goals in? Who's going to stop the goals from going in for me? So I don't know if that's a good combination when you're trying to sit there and figure out, okay, who's going to score and who's going to stop them from scoring.
We were a playoff team last year. I mean, I think we do have to remember that. It's not like the Galaxy were where they were at the end of 2018. They did get into the postseason. They were incredibly frail defensively. They did completely rely on Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I think they'll be better as a unit going forward because they'll be able to play more in a coherent style. We'll get to see what philosophy what style of play Guillermo Barros Escalotto has in mind for this group, because you couldn't do any of that with Zlatan Ibrahimovic. You had to just feed him, just get him the ball, let him figure it out. Defensively, you've got to go get first just some bodies, because you come into today with starting level players, Giancarlo Gonzalez at center back, Jorgen Skjelvik, who can play in the middle but can play on the left, Rolf Feltscher, who can play on the right. That's it. You got Julian Araujo and Didi Traore, who are young. Danilo Acosta, you have to sign to a deal. You picked him up in the waiver draft. You can rely on them, but does your team get better? Probably not. Your designated player spot's going to go to a forward that is opened up from Zlatan. Does another one open up? Roman Alessandrini, reportedly not back. They were negotiating with him, but he's drawing interest from Premier League clubs, according to reports. So that would open up another spot. Are you actually going to use that on a defensive player? You should. I don't think you're going to, but you should, because I don't know how much TAM you have to work with either to go out and get a defensive player, because you need a stud center back if you're the LA Galaxy to get anywhere past what you did this past season. Otherwise, you're going to be the same team pretty much. Maybe a little bit better defensively, maybe a little bit better with just a coherent setup, but you're going to be 4-5, and you're not going to go back into being part of the elite. You have to have a stud center back if you're going to get there. Whatever you do up top, because you're going to replace Zlatan with a guy who can score goals. If you don't, then you just missed on it. We know what you're trying to do there. You got to go get a stud center back, or you're not getting anywhere further than you did last year. And I think you might have gotten where you did last year with some smoke and mirrors. So that's where the Galaxy stand. There's a lot of teams that are near the top of this league that have those types of big question marks. There's other teams that are very close. There's others that one move could put them over the top. There's other teams like Chicago that have a ton of designated player spots that maybe surprise everybody. If they make the right moves, they can jump straight into things. That's where you're at right now. We're about halfway through MLS. We're going to get into the expansion teams coming up next. We'll go through the rest of the league's setup and where things stand at this stage of the offseason. We'll also get into all of the rumors that popped off over the weekend, and there's a bunch. Big names that you might not know yet but have performed at a very high level. There's lots of that to talk about as well, and we'll do all of that in hour number 2. Hang out with us. We'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2. Getting caught up on everything MLS as we start December. This is where teams can set themselves up to be a title contender, to be a playoff contender, or this is where teams kind of ruin their upcoming season. And this is a very important time, and I think the top teams are not looking at it as the offseason. The top teams are looking at this as their opportunity to make the right moves to grow. You got 2 new teams that are in the mix for 2020, Miami and Nashville. Miami still doesn't have a manager, and they are hiring their manager at the latest point of any recent expansion team, going back to the NYC and Orlando editions ahead of the 2015 season. I have to dig back further to see if somebody named their first manager at a later point in the calendar, but you're at a point with Miami, and we talked about it in the first hour about you should have a philosophy in place that's going to inform what kind of players you're going out and looking for. That's more important overall than who the manager is, but when you start talking about some of the types of players that Miami has been linked to, the right kind of manager can put it over the top on bringing that player in. You know, you saw it with Tata Martino and making the phone call to Miguel Almiron, and that put things over the top with him coming to Atlanta. The right kind of manager can do that, and it's sounding like, according to Taylor Twellman, Patrick Vieira will be that guy. He is the top of the list for Inter Miami. He also has a job at Ligue 1 in France with Nice. They're going to have to get him out of that job if they want to bring him to Miami. Haven't heard anything about that just yet. So you are where you've been with Miami. You're building a team from scratch. You have young talent in Matias Pellegrini and Julian Carranza from Argentina. You've made some good moves, I think, so far in building your team, but you've got a bunch of holes. I think when I look at Miami, my question is who's going to be the star? And that's the biggest question about Inter Miami at this point, because you know they need one. You know, is it Luis Suarez who joins in the summer? Is it Edinson Cavani? Is it somebody else who's been linked to this team? Who is going to be the guy whose name is on the back of the shirts in the stands because he is the superstar figure? That's what it comes down to for Miami with me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still looking at the possibility of someone like a David Silva, but I was going to ask, when it comes to the personnel that Inter Miami's brought in with what Paul McDonough and cast have done so far, the projected starting 11 that was put out there, what was your
time? It's a waste of time.
Okay.
It's a waste of time. It's nowhere near complete. So, I mean, it's Fantasyland. Like, you're going to have more players than you currently have. Like, you're going to have 5 more starters than you currently have. Maybe 6, maybe 7. So, sure, if you had to play tomorrow, you can field a lineup, but does it mean anything? No.
So then let me rephrase. With what they've been able to build so far and the personnel that they've been able to bring in, what's your appraisal?
It's a typical expansion team right now. It is what it is. I mean, you've got Mikey Ambrose, Ben Sweat at left back. You've got Grant Lillard and Christian McCoon, who's a young center back who might be better in the holding midfield. You've got Alvis Powell on the right side. You need more than that. That's not a defense that's going to get you to the playoffs. You've got a midfield of Victor Ulloa, Luis Argudo, David Norman Jr., George Acosta in the central midfield. You need more than that. Ulloa is the only one that I feel like is a starter right now. Matias Pellegrini can be an exciting young talent on the left. Lee Wynn can hold things together for you as a playmaker, although you might be looking to upgrade there. You've got Julian Carranza and Jerome Kiesewetter, who are both good, talented forwards, but both have question marks. Carranza's young. Kiesewetter had an initial rise, had injuries, and was with USL Championship last year. Jay Chapman's in the mix as well. That on paper right now, that's nowhere near a playoff team. That's as bad as Cincinnati was. But they're not done yet. So, I can throw an 11 out there, and it means nothing. Because out of that group, I think you're probably going to have one of your left backs start out of Sweater Ambrose. McCoon will probably start. Ulloa will probably start. Pellegrini will start. And that's what I'm counting on right now. Wynn might start. Carranza might start. Kiesewetter might start. Goalkeeper, you might go get somebody, and it's sounding like Luis Robles could be the guy. Okay. You might have 4 starters out of what you have so far.
And that was why I wanted to ask, and I'll probably end up doing the same thing when we get to Nashville, just from what they've been able to do, what you're thinking. But we got a couple of letters to go between I and N.
Yeah, Nashville's a little different because of the expectation. We'll get into that in a second. Minnesota first. Goalkeeper's the biggest question for me because Vito Mannone is talking about Serie A. I don't know about that, but if he's not coming back, you're talking about Ranjit Singh, who you picked up in the waiver draft, as your number 1 at the moment. I don't know. Dane St. Clair, young goalkeeper. Is he ready? I don't know. And this was a team that hosted a playoff game last year. You're not going to do that with Dane St. Clair or Greg Ranjit Singh from what we've seen. If they give you more than what we've seen so far, okay. You're going to have to get more out of Thomas Chacon now with Darwin Quintero gone. You brought him in young. You wanted to give him time. That's great. Time is now. It's a good core. You've got to get somebody who can score goals consistently because Angelo Rodriguez hasn't been that. Mason Toy has been that at times, but he's still kind of unpredictable. Those are my questions when it comes to Minnesota, and the biggest one is goalkeeper because I don't think you're getting back to where you were without a high-quality goalkeeper because Mannone was that for them this year.
And Mannone, a couple days ago, had pretty much said that I think he was looking to get back to Europe or was looking at Europe. And
he's under contract with Reading. So you're going to have to get him back on loan. That contract is done. The loan is done at the end of the year. He's under contract through the summer. So, getting back to Europe, he's under contract in Europe. That's not the question. Minnesota would have to get him back on loan and or sign him to a deal to get him back in the summer if you can't get him back on loan. Doesn't sound like any of that's going to happen because Mannone is talking about, I see my future in Serie A, which, again, I'm kind of questioning, but okay. None of that sounds like he's coming back to Minnesota. That shouldn't be a surprise at this point. So what are you going to do instead? And if you don't do anything instead, you're not going to get back to where you were.
No.
Flat out.
So for me, once again, the 2 questions are, who do you get to replace Quintero? And what's it going to look like in net? So
you got pieces for Quintero. Kevin Molino, healthy, should be able to pick up some of that slack. Thomas Chacon was expected to be a playmaker. You can deal with that one with what you have internally. At least you feel like you can. You don't have a goalkeeper right now who can step in. I don't see Ranjit Singh as giving you a Vito Mannone kind of season. So, and Vito Mannone stood on his head at times to get Minnesota where they were. You need somebody who can give you that with this group to get you back to where you were.
Yeah, so, once again, more questions right now. I have more questions than I do answers when it comes to Minnesota United.
Montreal's up next. What is Thierry Henry going to do? Are they going to actually create an identity? Because they haven't had one for a long time. What are their guys on loan from Bologna going to look like? Orji Okonkwo, loan is ended. Olivier Renard is saying that the plan is for Okonkwo to be back in Montreal for 2020. His end of the season media availability didn't sound like he necessarily wanted to be back in Montreal for 2020, so stay tuned on that. You did get the permanent deal with Saphir Taider, which is a very good one. For Montreal, you've got to get somebody up top who can score goals for you, period. Maxi Urruti is a hard-working forward. I really like what he brings to a team. He doesn't bring enough to Montreal. You got to score goals, and he just hasn't been able to do that consistently in his career. Defensively, Montreal's got to do some work as well, but I don't think any of that matters if they don't get a number 9 who can put the ball in the back of the net. Right now, defensively, you have 4 guys. You have Rayatala, you have Jorge Corrales, you have Rudy Camacho. All 3 are potential starters. Corrales may be a little bit of a question mark. Karifa Yao is your other center back who is I don't know how I feel about him just yet and relying on him to play 30 games a year. You've got to get better there, but none of it matters if you don't have a number 9, and that's what it comes back to for Montreal for me.
Off the top of your head, do you know Yao's background and how he ended up in Montreal?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
Why?
No, it's just because, Corrales, Camacho, Raytala, those to me were known commodities, and then seeing Yao pop up, I'm like, okay, that was a player that to me is new, and I was just wondering
no, he's a
how he ended.
No,
okay.
He's homegrown. He's 19.
Okay.
He's been there,
okay.
So it's just he's young. He hasn't played, so that's where you're at. I mean, you've got to get better defensively, but to me, just none of it matters if you don't have a guy who can score, because that's been their issue for a while now. Nashville, let's get to them and where things stand right now. It feels a little more complete than Miami, although they are still being linked to different moves that are out there. You have a solid goalkeeper in Joe Willis. You have a very good left back in Daniel Levitz. You have 2 solid center backs in Dave Romney and Jalil Anibaba. You have a solid right back, in my opinion, in Eric Miller. Good midfield with McCarty, Godoy, Derek Jones, who I think could be a breakout guy for Nashville. Randall Leal could be a star for them on the wing. Questions, though. It's his first season in MLS. Hani Mukhtar, questions. First season in MLS. David Accam, can he get back to where he was? If he can, you're in a great position with your attacking midfield. Can any of your forwards be that goal scorer with Dunladi, with Rios, with Lancaster? Can any of them step out and get you double-digit goals? You have a really solid group, and depending on what Nashville wants to do in terms of spending, you pick the right kind of moves to put it over the top, you can compete. I think this group can compete. They're not building like Cincinnati did. They're not building like Minnesota did. I think they're building with MLS veterans, with guys who know this league. And, your biggest 2 question marks are 2 of your signings that you've went outside on with Leal and Mukhtar. And if they can turn into something special, and, they have the potential to, this is a pretty good group.
Yeah, for me, I look at what Nashville's done, and for me, they're right there on the edge if you're looking for teams and who you're going to have as a part of the postseason discussion. So I'm looking for Nashville. It's like, okay, how are you going to continue to fill the roster pieces, and what are you going to continue to add? And you've got some DPs, but once again, the discussion we had back in hour 1, all right, with the core that you have, the DP that you bring in, or DPs, you don't want to upset what you're building. and then trying to have to rearrange things. So for me,
that's different with Nashville because you're starting from scratch. It's not the question with Columbus and Colorado because you have young talent that you're trying to play in both of those scenarios. This is a completely different thing. You don't have a core. You have people on paper, but you've never trained together. So whatever you do now is not affecting that. There's no chemistry. There's nothing. You've got 2 designated player spots. So you've got a lot of different things to work with here. If you are Nashville, if you are Gary Smith, if you're this front office, Ian Ayre, you're in a good spot. I really think Nashville has made the right moves so far. They have a solid base. They can compete. Now, they need to add depth, just like any expansion team would. And if they want to go use another designated player spot, and you've got 2 to work with, where do you want to use it? And that would be the question that I think they're running through in the front office is, okay, do we want to use it, defensively? You could go get a center back and go get if you're going to do that, go get a young designated player center back who can ease in a little bit. Romney and Anibaba can give you a lot of minutes. Tribbett can give you some minutes. And you get a young center back that can be an asset for you down the road. That would make a lot of sense. You don't really need it in the central midfield because you have McCarty and Godoy who can eat up minutes for you right now, and Jones who needs them to develop. You don't want to take away minutes from Leal or Akam, and you're expecting David Akam to give you designated player level output. That's what he's done. I think Nashville is expecting Daniel Rios to be a player that is worthy of this level and worthy of the minutes that he can earn here. So you don't necessarily want to block him. I think it's a center back. I think it's a young designated player center back that you can build around for a while and then is an asset for you in 2-3 years to potentially sell. That's where I'd be looking if I'm looking to sign somebody for Nashville.
And so with Mukhtar as a DP, then it's just trying to figure out what you want to do. But no, I see where you're coming from with the idea at the back.
All right, let's move on to New England and look at what the Revs have at the moment. So, backline, good. Butner, who you signed at the end of the season. Andrew Farrell, Antonio De La Mea, Brandon Bye. You're in a good spot there. DeJuan Jones is back, who can play on the left side as well if you want him to. I think he's better in the midfield. Matt Turner in goal. You're in good shape defensively. You need depth. Central midfield, Zahibo Caicedo back. You have Scott Caldwell back. You have Isaac Anking, who's going to need some minutes here at some point. Maybe he gets them with Revolution 2 and USL League 1 this season. Pania on the left side, dangerous. Right side right now with Tejan Buchanan. So the right wing, depending on how you play, could be a potential spot. Are you going to move Carlos Heel over there like you did last year and then have him tuck inside? Okay, that solves that problem. Up top, you have Gustavo Bo, you have Teal Bunbury. Justin Renix is another young player who's going to need minutes here at some point, probably Revolution 2. This is a good group. You need depth. You need depth defensively. You need minutes for your young players, but you have a USL League 1 team coming online. You probably need a right winger, even if it's not as a regular starter, if you want to do that empty bucket kind of deal that you did last year, where Heel was on the right side but tucked in. Brandon Bye bombed up and down the right side as a right back. Gustavo Bo kind of dropped in underneath Teal Bunbury. It was fluid. It was a little difficult to deal with. If that's what you do, then you're in a really good spot. I do think you probably need a right wing option to be able to play a more traditional 4-2-3-1 if you decide to go that way. Outside of that in depth, the Revs are in a really good spot coming into 2020.
I look at the 11 and the guys that you mentioned. New England's going to be a pain in the butt for everybody in the Eastern Conference.
I don't know if they're going to be that good. Why you say that?
Well, for me, pain in the butt doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be 1, 2, or 3. I just think that they're going to be tough each and every time out.
Okay. They're good. I mean,
yeah,
they're good. Like, I don't know if they're not 1, 2, or 3, then I don't know how much of a pain they're going to be every time out, because that 1, 2, and 3 is the elite level for me. I don't think the Revolution are there. I don't know if they're going to spend the money to get there. They have a designated player spot. Are they going to go out and use it defensively? Because that's maybe the weakest spot. You're not going to go out and use a designated player to sit Bo or Heel. I don't think you're going to do it to sit Pena. I don't think you're going to do it in the holding midfield when you have Caicedo and Sahibo. It feels like center back would be the only one that you might do it. Is that going to put you over the top and get you into the top 3 in the East? I'm not 100% sure. I think the Revolution are a good team, but I don't know if they are better than 4th, 5th right now in the Eastern Conference. And I don't know if there's an obvious route for them to get higher than that without blowing it up and upgrading a bunch of spots from players that are already good. And are they willing to do that? I don't know if they are just yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking, for me, I had the Revs possibly as a 4-5, improving on their 7 from last year. So, I mean, it was only a handful of points this past season to get you from 7 to 4 or 5. So, yeah, for me, I just think that they're going to be tough each and every week right now as things stand. No, are they going to win each and every time out? No. Are they world beaters? No. But I think that they will improve on being 7th from last year in the East.
Yeah, it's a couple more wins. I mean, honestly, I think they played better than that under Bruce Arena, and some of that was just Bruce Arena doing a better job with the pieces he had than Brad Friedel was doing with those same pieces. So if you play at the same level that Bruce Arena had them, which you have pretty much the same group, that's a reasonable expectation of 4-5. Is that good enough for next year? And do you kind of roll with that for now and then get another year under your belt and say, all right, now we can get better than Zahibo, or now we can get better than De La Mea, or now we can get better than Pena? Those possibilities are going to be there for the Revolution when the time is right. I don't think they do anything dramatic yet. I think if they do anything this offseason to upgrade where they're at, it's on the back line. And I don't think it's a designated player. I think it's probably a TAM type of move if they've got that to work with. That would make them better defensively. They need depth defensively. That's a different conversation. But to change who they are and get them in any way better than a 4-5, you're going to have to be better defensively than where you are. And that's where it's going to take the investment. One more before we take a break. New York City. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is expected to be the manager, although that's kind of gotten quiet. They've brought back most of their core. They made some good moves late last season to lock up Maxi Morales for a long period of time. You have Eber and Alexandru Matrica that you brought in last year. Valentin Castellanos has been one of the better signings in the league when you brought him in, and people were like, who is this guy? What's he going to do? He's played his way into the Argentine U23s. Ring, Tennerholm, Matarrita, it's a lot of the same names that we've seen for a long time. The question is going to be the manager. I mean, the question is going to be, Dome Tarrant made this team better than they were under Patrick Vieira, and different because he didn't have a David Villa. He didn't have big names. The club went in a different direction. They were better at the end of the Dome Tarrant era than they were at the end of the Patrick Vieira era. Is the next manager going to come in and take it to an even higher level? Because it's going to be the same players. Is Van Bronckhorst or somebody else going to come in and elevate this team even more? Is that possible? I don't know. I think it's a high bar right now. I mean, I think they are, the regular season team to beat in the East. They haven't been able to do it in the postseason. But can that new manager get them there? Because they have the talent to be an MLS Cup contender.
Yeah.
But can that new manager get them to that point?
Yeah, and that's the integration question for me. So, no, I mean, we talk about New England being a 4-5, New York City FC for me is 1-2-3. And, right now you were the top side in 19. Pretty much the same guys are back. So for me, I would have you right there at 1-2 heading into 2020 with the personnel that you have on hand.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and skip over to the other side of the river and start with the Red Bulls as we run through MLS and where things stand going into December. We'll be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Running through where things stand in MLS as we head into the silliest of seasons in December, a month away from the transfer window opening up in Europe. That's going to affect players leaving MLS. There are some of those. This is the time of year where you start to hear about South American players being signed and coming into training camps. So you're going to get more of those rumors. Today is kind of more about where things stand, what teams could be looking at, what makes sense to set the scene for the rest of silly season. We talked about NYC. Let's talk about their Hudson River Derby rivals, the New York Red Bulls. Huge changes for the Red Bulls. No Luis Robles, no Bradley Wright Phillips coming back. Kamar Lawrence reportedly requested a trade. He wanted a new contract. MLSsoccer.com confirmed that he wants a trade after being denied a new contract. So for the Red Bulls, questions, there's a bunch of them. Who's in goal? Is it Ryan Mara? He's done well in his limited opportunities. My guess is it's him. Who's up top? Is it White? Is it Barlow? Is it Matthias Jorgensen, who he signed and played a lot with the twos? My guess is it's all of the above. I don't think they're going to go out and spend on that position either. I don't know how different the Red Bulls look than what they have right now, and that's the question about the New York Red Bulls and what they want to do long term. And I think this is the question that a lot of their fans have. Are they going to go spend to replace Tyler Adams? They didn't. Luis Robles? Probably not. Bradley Wright Phillips? Probably not. They have 2 designated player spots open. What do they do? You know, is it going to be the same type of team that we have seen over the years with one of your different options up top, with Alex Moyle on one side, Royer on the other, Gaku as the number 10, Sean Davis in the middle, probably with Christian Caceres. Backline, I don't think Michael Murillo will be back. Does that mean Duncan steps in? Probably. You're talking about a youth international. You've got your two center backs in Parker and Long. Kamar Lawrence is there right now until you decide to do something different. Ryan Mara's in goal. It is what you would expect it to be at this point. And I don't think they make any big, bold moves in the offseason. I'm just not expecting it.
No, and I know that a lot of folks were sitting there wondering, how are you going to replace BWP? Well, BWP really wasn't that impactful. I mean, he wasn't starting, 47 games for you. He was coming off the bench. There were times when it looked like he was both carrying and playing the piano out there when he was out there offensively for Red Bull. So for me, the focus on BWP is somewhat that's not there for me. So I still view the Red Bulls with the pieces that they have where they were last season. So, okay, you're going to do anything with your two DPs? Don't know. But yeah, so I haven't seen a whole lot of reason for me to think that Red Bulls would be any higher in the scale when it comes to the Eastern Conference right now with what they've done and what they've not done really in the offseason.
No, the question about replacing BWP is valid because it's the same one that was the question about replacing Tyler Adams. You didn't replace BWP last season. You replaced him internally with Brian White, with Tom Barlow, and they did okay. But they weren't Bradley Wright Phillips from the year before, and that's why the Red Bulls were not the team they were in 2018, in 2019. Also, Tyler Adams being gone. Sure. I mean, Christian Caceres stepped in. Mark Tchaikovsky stepped in. You had guys who played in that role, and they didn't give you what Tyler Adams gave you. So you were not as effective. That's why 2019 was very different than 2018 for the Red Bulls. 2020 has the potential to be very different because Luis Robles, 1 point for you with quality play and goal. Is Ryan Mara going to be able to do that? If you move on from Michael Murillo, is Kyle Duncan or Reese Buckmaster going to be able to give you that same level at right back? If you move on from Kamar Lawrence, same question. If you move on from Aaron Long, those questions are out there. Deshaun Nealis or Amron Tarek, do they give you that same level there? Because you've had erosion from what the Red Bulls were at their height to now. And there's no sign that they're going to make a dramatic change to curb that erosion. So Brian White is not Bradley Wright Phillips a couple years ago. He's not. I don't see it. I don't think Tom Barlow is, but he's at least a little more of a potentially growing into that. I don't think Christian Caceres is Tyler Adams. I don't think Mark Tchaikovsky is Tyler Adams. I don't know if Kyle Duncan is Michael Murillo. I don't think so, but I'm not sold yet. I don't think Reese Buckmaster is. You don't have anybody to step in right now for Kamar Lawrence unless you have somebody with Red Bulls 2 or in your academy that you would come in, but they're not going to be Kamar Lawrence straight away. I don't think Ryan Mara can be Luis Robles straight away. So it's erosion. It's not falling off a cliff, but it's not having what you had before, and that's why you go from being a record-setting Supporter Shield winning team in 2018 to getting into the postseason and putting up a nice fight, but going home in 2019, right now, 2020, I don't know if you're a playoff team. And there's still a lot of things that have to be decided from the Red Bulls side. Aaron Long is probably the biggest one. Kamar Lawrence will be right there as well. If that erosion continues to hit more spots on the field, they are not a playoff team unless the guys who step into those spots outperform what we've seen them perform so far. Or the Red Bulls actually spend a little bit to go replace these guys. That's going to be the biggest question on the Red Bulls. Do they get the right replacements for their players that have gone and potentially will go? And I don't know what the answer is going to be to that. But continuing where they are, it's going to be more slight erosion, and that slight erosion could take them out of the postseason and continue to lead to more empty seats at Red Bull Arena.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm right there with you with that. I mean, right now, until looking at the completion of the window, I just don't have the Red Bulls moving up, certainly. So I would have them still in that same location, if not further down.
The only way they move up is if they go out and add talent, or if Chris Armas coaches this talent up, or if you see young players make a jump. And there just hasn't been anything to lead you to believe that right now. I don't see that. I think they could maintain, maybe, and if they do, that's going to be impressive from Armas and from the young talent. I think they need more talent at the moment, and I just don't know if it's coming. So we'll have to see. Orlando, trying to get into the playoffs for the first time. I don't think they're anywhere close to that at the moment, although Orlando's being linked to some bigger names than we've ever heard before from the Lions. And I'm not talking like Kaku names or Nani names. I'm talking about players who are really producing right now in different spots of the world. So we'll get to that in a minute. Orlando, who's going to be in charge? Is it Oscar Pereira? It hasn't happened yet, so we'll have to wait and see there. What do they look like defensively? Because they've never figured their back line out. You have, at the moment, Juan on the right, who's very good. Robin Janssen was good for this team. Kamal Miller, I think, can be good for this team. He needs to play. It's time for Kamal Miller to get some minutes. Joao Moutinho on the left side, I don't think he's best served as a left back. I think he is better served in this league as a holding midfielder, but everybody wants to play him at left back. I just don't think he's quite athletic enough to be there. You have Uri Rosell that you have re-signed. Right now you're pairing Rosell and Mendez in the midfield behind Mauricio Pereira, who I like. Nani, Mueller, good wingers. You need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net, and that's been the number one thing that they've been linked to. Alan Pulido, Golden Boot winner in Liga MX. He's been linked to Orlando along with 3 other MLS teams. You have other talents in South America that have been linked to Orlando. So if you solve that problem, then you're going to be moving on from Dom Dwyer. Okay, I think that time has come. But until we know who's in charge, it's a little harder to tell because Orlando is one of those clubs that have not created a philosophy. They don't have a Orlando way to play. Oscar Pereira would help build that. And you've seen it at Dallas. Dallas, the way they play, is building off of Oscar Pereira built through the academy and then through the first team. He can do the same for Orlando, and he is worth whatever he is asking for Orlando because they don't have that right now. That's the number one thing they need, and that's their biggest question, is who's going to build this philosophy because that's going to inform everything else that happens.
Can I pause the teams for a second?
Sure.
We have conference alignment for 2020 released.
Ooh. Dun, 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 dun. We get the storm. All right, what is it?
All right. Inter Miami and Nashville will be in separate conferences for their debut season, confirmed by the league. Inter Miami in the East, Nashville in the West, ensuring both conferences have 13 clubs.
I don't like that at all. Not a
Chicago
fan.
remains in the East. Not a fan either.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything else remains. It's just Miami goes into the East, Nashville goes into the West. I don't think they got that right at all, but
nope.
Whatever.
So.
I just don't get it. I do agree with Wes Bowling, who wrote that he feels like this indicates the temporary nature of this alignment. I completely agree. If Chicago is going to come back to the East ultimately, or you're going to scrap East-West and you're going to add a Central or whatever, ultimately, fine. Instead of moving Chicago around, you just throw Nashville out there because they're starting fresh. Okay, I guess. I don't like it because I'm assuming this means that Nashville will not be coming to visit Atlanta this season, and I think you're you're wasting an opportunity. I think you're wasting an opportunity with them not playing home and away with Cincinnati as well. So I feel like that's a big waste. And that would have been worth the bouncing back and forth for Chicago, in my opinion, to help Nashville get off the ground in a strong way with home and away with two close rivals. But they're not going to. So that's just where it is. So I'm assuming, without knowing what the schedule format's going to be, that Atlanta's trip to Nashville week 1 will be the only time that those teams meet in the regular season.
Each club continues to play a 34-game regular season, 17 home and away. Every team plays their 12 intra-conference opponents twice, once home and once away, for a total of 24. The other 10 regular season matches coming against the opposite conference. Those inter-conference opponents revealed with the full 2020 schedule release.
Wow, okay. So you're not playing every team. So there are teams you will not play. Okay. If they want to stick to 34, then that's where you're at. I'm not a huge fan. I don't like it. Because now, if you're Atlanta United, you will play everybody in the East: Chicago, Columbus, D.C., Cincinnati, Miami, Montreal, New England, New York City, Red Bulls, Orlando, Philadelphia, Toronto, twice.
Yep.
So that's 24 of your games. And then you're going to play everybody but 3 in the West. So this is why Supporter Shield takes an even bigger step back in terms of importance, because if you draw a season in the East, if you draw from the lots, however they decide this, and you get a year where you don't play LAFC, you don't play Seattle, and you don't play the Galaxy if they go out and sign somebody big, which I don't think you're going to get somebody who doesn't play all 3 of those, but let's say you do. Well, then your season just got a whole lot easier. That's not a fan. There's not an easy way to deal with it, and I know there's a million different scenarios. I'm guessing you felt locked into 34 games because that's where you want to stay ultimately. Okay, then you have something awkward for this season. All right. I'd like to hear reasoning here as to why that is. I'm guessing Chicago will stay in the East if it stays that way when you add all these other teams. All right. Let's hear the reasoning, because you're missing some opportunities right now. So, I mean, right now there's no guarantee that Nashville and Cincinnati even play, which is not good. There's no guarantee that Toronto and Vancouver play. There's no guarantee of some of these cross-country rivalries. You don't have guarantees of your LA teams playing your New York teams, for example. You don't have guarantees. You don't have a guarantee of LAFC coming to Atlanta next year. Not a fan. So now, because you've made this step, you've made this announcement, this is where you've gone, okay, now's where you need to, I think, lay out some groundwork for what happens in 21 with Austin coming in right now solo, which might not be the case, but right now it is. And then Sacramento and St. Louis coming in 22. Probably you're not going to get any of that until Team 30 is announced. And that's where, when that announcement comes, I would love it if MLS would lay out the map for this is what it will look like when we add this team or these teams. This is what the schedule will look like. This is how it will go. Because then I think we'll know. Right now, it just feels a little haphazard. And I feel like you're leaving some good opportunities on the table in the format that we're going to have for next year. Look, it is what it is. MLS Cup is going to be even more important because the Supporter Shield, it's going to be even more uneven. It was already unbalanced because we talked about it last season with Atlanta United and the travel they had. Well, now, is it going to be better, worse? Is it more by chance? But you're not going to play 3 teams in the West. And depending on who you draw not to play, you could have a much easier schedule. So that's where you're at. That's how it's looked. I'm a little surprised by Nashville going to the West. I'm not a fan of that. Nashville and Cincinnati need to play, and honestly, I think Nashville really needs to go to Cincinnati since they're not coming to Atlanta, so they can get that experience as part of building this club with their fans having the opportunity to get out on the road and go to this game and grow the interest of this rivalry. If they don't play, it's a gigantic airball from MLS in the scheduling.
Katie Weaver this morning, she's got a couple of thoughts, but we'll stick with the alignment one first. She goes, alignment, why ruin the potential of a great conference rivalry? Asterisk, throw hot chicken against the wall. GIF.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. Other than what Wes Bowling said, and I agree with him in that this makes you feel like, okay, ultimately Chicago will be in the East and stay in the East. Okay, fine. Will Nashville come back to the East? They should. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for them to stay in the West. So is it just a temporary thing? Okay, it'd be great if you said that. Even if you can't go into detail, if you could just say at this point, for 2020, this is the format we are using currently with the teams we have. As new teams come in, things will change, including the alignment. And even if Nashville is the one who comes out and says, yeah, we're not locked into the West for good, give us that. Because right now it feels like a big missed opportunity. Big missed opportunity.
Four-Card Ahmed busted out a Shatner gif and said, why is that MLS so dumb? So you don't play every team in the league and can call yourself a champion? WTF with multiple question marks and exclamation points behind.
I disagree with the end of that. I mean, the Supporter Shield was never intended to be the championship of this league. MLS Cup is. And playoffs are playoffs, and that's what it determines. There are leagues in this country, and two of them specifically, where you don't play every team in the league. Major League Baseball, because you've gotten away from the National League and American League being separate leagues. You can throw that in the ground a long time ago. And the NFL. Playoffs determine the champion. This, just to me, it further erodes the importance of the Supporter Shield. It's still a big thing. It's still, important, but it's like it's what the President's Trophy in the NHL. It's a nice
so
trophy.
You got the most points, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good trophy, and I mean, it's still, they're not going to take a CONCACAF spot away from it, so that's good. But you can't say that it determines the best team anymore. I don't feel like you could necessarily say that anyway because of the unbalanced schedule. Now you definitely can't say it. It's MLS Cup. That's the champion, and that's what it is. I don't think it goes to the point that Ahmed said, but it affects the Supporter Shield more for me.
Yeah, I mean, President's Trophy, so you beat up on everybody and got the most points. You didn't play everybody. So, yeah, it's a nice shiny trophy, and it might be a banner for you. But in the NHL, that's basically all that it is.
Yeah, well, that's what it is now. It was that to a degree, but now that's definitely all it is because you won't see everybody. So Nashville, as Joe Patrick says, they will log more flight miles than we've ever seen before in this league. They have to. I mean, with all the travel out west, because they're going to play everybody out west. Yeah, it's got to be the wildest season we've ever seen. So we go back to Nashville from a roster perspective. They have a good core, but, man, they're going to need even more depth because everybody's going to have to play some minutes in this league in this season because you're going to have a ton of travel that's going to affect you.
The Fixer Esquire. So Nashville won't be in the same conference as the 6 teams closest to their city. Absolute joke in all caps.
Yep. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I think there was more to gain from, even if that's what they had to do, flip-flopping Chicago back and forth, than giving Nashville a less smooth runway in coming into the league. Nashville should have had every opportunity to be as strong as possible, and this is taking away from that. So it's just not a good setup. It's not. I don't know.
Ahmed comes back in and says, you can win both the Shield and MLS Cup without playing every team. Why is MLS trying to be so different from the rest of the world?
No, I think that's the easy thing to always jump to about being different from the rest of the world. You're different from the rest of the world because of the size of your league. So, I mean, I think there's some things that you have to be different than the rest of the world on because of that. So that part I throw to the side for a minute. I just think you could have potentially gotten here in a better way. You know, let's say you did play everybody. So that would mean adding 3 more games. And that would mean having an uneven number of home and away. So if you wanted to correct that, then you're going to have to add 4 games. Was that just not a possibility? I think the league is at a point that they could handle a 38-game season. I do. And maybe it's something that you'll see down the road. Maybe the CBA negotiations factor into it. Maybe they didn't feel like they could commit to it until they have a CBA in place, because those are the kinds of things that are in a collective bargaining agreement. How many games in the regular season, when the training camps open, how many training sessions, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they felt like they were completely, limited to 34. So if you're going to stay at 34, there was no way to play everybody twice. Or no way to play everybody twice in your conference and then play everybody once in the other conference. That was impossible. So you would have had to either play 3 teams in your conference once to play everybody once, at least once, or increase the number of games. And maybe you felt like you couldn't increase the number of games right now. Maybe they will next year. I hope so, because I do think playing everybody once is important. And I think you can get there without it being too stressful. I hope this is temporary. Nashville being in the West has to be temporary. There's no point in having Nashville and Atlanta and Nashville and Cincinnati so close without having 2 games a year between those teams. It's just a completely wasted opportunity. So, and this is the question I want to ask people is, there's a lot of outrage right now, but how would you have fixed it? The Nashville-Chicago one, to me, is an easy fix, and that's the way I would have done it, and that's what I said from day one. Okay, leave that to the side. That's different. How would you have formatted the season? And with the assumption, because I think it's a valid one, that you were limited to 34 games. I think your only 2 options were what you have, or you play 3 teams in your conference once and play everybody in the other conference. That's the only way you could do it. It's one or the other, and I don't know which one's better. So,
but don't you want the equality of playing everyone in at least your conference twice? As opposed to leaving.
If I had to pick between those 2, yeah, I'd go with what they did. If that was my only option, then yeah, I would probably go to what they did and play every team in your own conference twice. Neither one's good. Both have problems. I think the bigger question for me is, why couldn't you go to 38 games? Was it just something that you could not do under the confines of the CBA, and without knowing what the new CBA will bring yet? You had to have a schedule format. You had to have these things in place because you have to have things booked. You can't wait until the CBA is done to book the season. It's impossible.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah, and you had to make a commitment. And if you were limited to 34, then you were limited to 34. And those were your 2 choices. I hope we get like a Q&A or something about it, because I think that would provide some clarity. If this is a temporary fix format-wise, because of the CBA negotiations, because of the other teams coming in future years, I'll take it. I'll eat it for 1 year. But if this is the kind of way you're going to go forward in a long-term picture, no, I don't like it. I think you need to play everybody at least once. I think that's very important.
Ricky Ricardo was annoyed as I am for Nashville not being in the East. I'm sure their fans are just as annoyed that the majority of their games won't be near their closest geographical opponents.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. So Nashville is in the Central Time Zone. But now they will have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the Pacific Time Zone. 6 games on the West Coast. They'll have others that'll be 1 hour behind. They'll have some that don't change. Then you'll have games in the East as well. But you'll have 6 games, 2 hours behind you. So you'll have some late games. You'll have some late kickoffs. I guess that's a little bit more than normal. Feels like a little bit more. I guess being in the Central Time Zone helps you just a little bit with that, but it's a lot of travel. I mean, somebody's pointed out too, Michael Head pointed out that Nashville's airport's not a major hub, so you're going to have maybe more connections than most would. And see, that's another one. If you're getting it down to Nashville, Chicago, traveling out of Chicago anywhere you want to go is a whole lot easier than traveling out of Nashville. So that factors into it. And that's another valid question here is why isn't it Chicago that drew this? Because their travel would be easier in this situation. I think I disagree with it being Nashville that goes west than Chicago because I think you lost a lot of opportunities with Nashville being in the East. One of them had to go. I think it would have made more sense to be Chicago. That's one part of this. The schedule format is the other, and if you were limited to 34, and that's my assumption, then you had 2 ways to do it. You could play everybody, but 3 teams in your conference you're only playing once, or you're not going to play everybody. And that was really it. It was one or the other. So you didn't have easy ways to handle it any which way, not with more teams coming in, and not without knowing who Team 30 is. I mean, if you knew that at this point, if you'd already made that decision that, okay, it's Charlotte or it's Phoenix or it's Vegas or whatever, you've already got that done, then you could create that roadmap. And then you could say, like, it will be like this, then it will be like this, then it will be like this. We're negotiating about the number of games increasing because if you follow leagues around the world, 38 games in a regular season is not asking too much. Now you have playoffs after that. And if you go to 38, then okay, the 1 game single elimination, I still don't love it, but at least I get it because you're keeping the number of games down in league play because you have to count your playoffs as part of your league play. But now, and it's a good question that I want to say, and I'm going to pull it up right now. Michael Ruiz asked, do you go back to the 2-leg series? And I don't think they're going to. I just don't think they're going to. Now, it doesn't – one thing I would push back on, Michael says, 1-game playoffs lead too much to the right team ending up in MLS Cup. You get teams maybe that aren't the best teams in MLS Cup. Well, look at Liga MX right now. The top 4 seeds were all eliminated in 2-leg playoffs. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 that advance. So things can happen any which way you go. But I do agree that if you're going to play 34 and you're going to play an unbalanced schedule, you want to give the best teams every opportunity to get there. I would go 2 games. I would go 2 games all the way through. But I've said that from the beginning, and none of that's changed for me. I don't think that's happening. I think they are set with where they are with the playoff format. So I think now you have the potential for a team to get a luck of the draw on the schedule and get a higher seed and get a better playoff match and have an easier road to get through when they might not be the best team. Now, it might not work out that way, but it very easily could work out that way. And that's what we're going to have to wait and see. This creates a lot of questions.
Shiva doesn't like the idea of playing a team in the playoffs for the first time. It seems like winning the cup is going to be harder than ever before. Thank God we already have one.
I don't worry about that. It's not so much the playoffs playing a team for the first time. I just like to see everybody in the season. I'd like to see every team during the season. The NFL, look, you get it. You can't get to a season where you're playing everybody. It's impossible. It's not the way football works. So it is what it is. You've accepted it. Major League Baseball, I think, will get to a point where you play everybody, and I think the leagues will matter less and less. I mean, you've already kind of eroded that history of American League, National League with interleague play. I think you're only going to expand that. So you need to play everybody. I mean, do you play everybody in the other conference as much as you play everybody in your conference? No, you don't. But I think you need to play everybody. And that's going to require either changing your structure with your conferences and such, or add more games. Right now, you'd have to add more games with a 2-conference setup. If you get to 30 teams and you go to 3 conferences and you play every team in your conference twice, that's 18. And then you play everybody else, that's still 38. So it's going to be hard to keep it at 34 games and get what you get. I think if you're going to stick with single-game elimination, you really need to get to 38 games. And then your longest road through postseason is going to require you to play 3 games. Correct? No, 4 games. That would be your longest possible road. So that would get you to 42. I think that's better for top teams than some teams only playing 34 and not playing everybody, and that's their season. If you don't have Leagues Cup, if you don't have CONCACAF Champions League, if you only play 34 games, you don't make the playoffs, that's it. That's not enough. Get to 38 as a minimum base, and that's where I think the schedule works out better. You can play everybody in a much easier format. It all makes more sense that way. So I don't know. The CBA is going to affect this. It has to. It absolutely has to. So we didn't know what we would be overreacting about on a Monday until this game.
Now we do.
Yeah, I mean, this is the overreaction Monday. We're over time. We're going to take a quick break just to reset. We're going to run through real quick, just very quickly. We'll go into more detail tomorrow about the rest of the teams in MLS and wrap up this kind of baseline of where everybody sits going into the transfer window. But we're going to take a quick break, catch our breath, and we'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Deep into stoppage time. It's going to set a record. We got lots of VAR today, so we're going to have lots of stoppage time to try to finish our discussion about teams' biggest questions, where things stand, rumors around the league, because there were a bunch since we talked to you last week, and then more reaction to the schedule format that is out there. So we left off at Philadelphia in terms of questions. I think it's an easy one with the Union. How do you replace Harris Medunjanin, both from a possession standpoint, from a number 6 standpoint? Jamiro Montero, do you bring him back because he was good on loan for you? If you lose both of them, you're losing 2 of your 4 midfielders and your 4-4-2. So defense good, forwards good with Shabilko, with Santos, with options up top. You get Corey Burke back, even better. You have a good goalkeeper. All that's good. You're missing 2 of your best midfielders potentially for next year, and you play a 4-4-2 diamond. Kind of critical when you look at the Union. So what do they do to replace Medunjanin specifically? That's their number one question. It's an easy one. Portland, what do they look like? Diego Valeri, it hasn't gotten done yet, even though everybody's thought it would be done. Well, that's a big one. That's a big question. You are solid defensively. Jeff Antonella, I guess, will be the guy. It looks like Steve Clark has left. With Brian Fernandez gone, you need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net, because I don't know if you can trust Tomas Konechny, Jeremy Abobasi. I don't know if any of them can give you what Brian Fernandez did. And Portland looked ordinary without Brian Fernandez last year. They've got to go replace him in a big way. That's their number one thing. Valeri's part of it. You need to get that done and keep that continuity, but you got to replace the goals that Brian Fernandez gave you, or you're going to be a ordinary bottom half playoff team in the Western Conference if you're the Timbers. So, Real Salt Lake, biggest question is Kyle Beckerman. Goalkeeper, we knew. It's not a question. We knew what they were going to do. Nick Raimondo retiring. You've got David Ochoa as your young goalkeeper of the future. You have Putna as another option who was actually pretty good in moments where we saw him play. So, Andrew Putna, David Ochoa, you've got 2 good goalkeepers. Ochoa is your goalkeeper of the future, and if he's ready to take it now, you give him the number 1 shirt, he's your guy. But Kyle Beckerman is a player that if you don't have him, that means you're dropping Damir Kreilach into the number 6 role permanently. That takes the option of playing him up top out. That means Corey Baird or Sam Johnson has to step up and take that number 1 spot. I think the left wing is a question as well. With no Sebastian Salcedo, who is going to be that player on the other side of Jefferson Savarino that scares opponents? All of it revolves around Beckerman, though. If you bring him back, Kreilach is a little bit of your utility guy. You're very good like you were last year. If you get anything out of Michael Chang, Tate Schmidt, Julian Vasquez to replace Salcedo, you're fine. Goalkeeper, you knew was going to be an issue. It's going to take time to solve that one. I think you knew that was coming when Raimondo would hang it up. So is Ochoa the guy? Is it Putna? You knew that was coming. You were already ready for it. It is what it is. San Jose, what does it look like in year 2 for Matias Almeida? You've got a lot of people back. You've got your back line, solid, good, it's back. Goalkeeper, back with Vega. Midfield, could you get a little bit better, especially in the holding midfield? Yeah, I think you could, potentially. Does Jackson Ewell take that step up? Does he give you a little bit more defensively? Maybe. There's rumors about San Jose spending money on a striker, Alan Pulido. That would change who they are in a big way. Looks like you're not going to have Christian Espinoza back on loan, but I think you can weather that one with options you have in-house. Does that mean Magnus Eriksson moves out to the wing? Potentially. Do you go big? Is this when San Jose, and this is my biggest question for the Quakes, is this the year that they say, we're really close, and we're going to spend some money, and we're going to spend 8 figures to bring in Alan Pulido, who we think can score 20-plus goals for us? And does that put us into the MLS title conversation? I think it could. I really think it could. It's just going to be, do you pull the trigger? That's their number one question. Seattle, defensively, you don't have one right now. I mean, you just don't. You were already piecing it together with Chad Marshall retiring, with Roman Torres out for PEDs. Both are not back next year. So right now you have 3 defenders. Period. That's it. That's what you have. You have 3 defenders. You play 4. That's the way Brian Schmetzer plays. So it's not good. They have to get better defensively, or they can't repeat. They just can't. You can't rely on Nuhu Tolo as your left back. You have to have somebody with Xavier Arriaga. It could be Gustav Svensson. Leerdam is a very good right back. If Svensson comes out of the midfield, you've got to replace him there. Does that mean Jordi Dellum is ready to step up? Danny Leyva ready to step up? Emmanuel Cecchini, is he ready to give you anything? Do you drop Jovan Jones to the left back role? That means you're asking Hendwala Buana to step up and be a star left winger. Defensively, they've got to make some big decisions because it will affect some other positions in the team as well. Right now, Seattle cannot be a favorite to repeat as MLS Cup champions without making multiple moves defensively. They can't be. Kansas City, are they going to get a number 9? Are they going to score goals? Are they going to get somebody who can consistently score 15-plus goals? If they do, they're a title contender. If they don't, forget it. Ain't happening. It's that simple. And is it Lucas Cavallini? Is it Alan Pulido? Now he's been linked to Kansas City. It feels like he's been linked to everybody in MLS. That's the question, and it's been the question since they traded Dom Dwyer. Who is going to score the goals for Kansas City? Last year they had injuries that made it even more glaring that they weren't getting the goals. But until they answer that question, Kansas City cannot be a top team in the Western Conference. Toronto, their biggest question, Michael Bradley. He's their fulcrum. He's everything to them in the midfield. If you're not bringing him back, you have to replace him with that type of player if you're going to keep the same personality of the way you play. Number one question. It's an easy one for them. Everything else, do you get Nicolas Benazet back? Question, yeah, but you can deal with that one. The Mario Balotelli stuff didn't make any sense for Toronto to begin with, and Christian Jack said that what he was hearing out of Toronto is there was no truth to Toronto chasing Mario Balotelli, so didn't really make any sense anyway because you'd have to go to 2 up top and change things around with Balotelli and Altidore, so it's all about Bradley. If you don't bring him back, you got to replace him. If you do bring him back, then you're in a good spot to be among the best teams in the East. Vancouver, where do you want to start? It's just not good enough. One of your best players, Ali Adnan, might not be back. There's not a lot to hang your hat on if you're the Vancouver Whitecaps. Mark Dos Santos said in the middle of last season he wanted to be a team that was high energy, high pressing. He didn't have the players to do it. Well, now you got to go get them. And that's the question is, can you? Because you have a good goalkeeper in Maxime Crépeau. You have, right now, one of the better left backs in the league in Ali Adnan, although he might not be sticking around. You have Jordi Reyna, who's a good attacking piece in the midfield. I'm trying to find other positives with the Whitecaps, and that's all I got. Derek Cornelius is all right as a center back. I mean, that's about it. Freddie Montero is a veteran goal scorer who can get you about 10 a year. That's all you got. Vancouver's just not good enough. They are nowhere near talented enough to compete. And until they address a lot of every major group on the field, they're just not going to be able to do it. So at this point, if you're committed to Marc Dos Santos, if that's the way you're going to go, then you need to get the players that he wants or get the kind of players he wants to be able to play what he wants to do, because it wasn't good enough last year, and it doesn't look good enough on paper right now either. So I don't think there's a lot to be positive about if you're the Vancouver Whitecaps at the moment. So that's the rest of the league. If you have questions, if you're listening to this later, please hit us up on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Let us know what your questions are about different teams in the league, how you think teams are going to answer some of the questions that we brought up. Let us know on Twitter at Soccer Down Here, and we can get into that as the week goes on, because there's a lot of players that are linked to MLS right now that could be answering some of these questions. I feel like we mentioned Alan Pulido a bunch in all of that. He has been linked at different points in the last week to 10 days to San Jose, Orlando, Chicago, and Sporting Kansas City. 12 goals in 18 matches in the Apertura. He's with Chivas right now, 28 years old. He's played in Europe, valued at $4.5 million on transfer marked. I would assume you're going to have to pay a good bit more than that to get him. Jesus Hernandez of La Afición says that Chicago is aggressively pursuing him, and Pulido has received it pretty well. He's interested. So wherever Alan Pulido ends up, I think every team that we mentioned, with the exception of San Jose, it would make them a lot better, but it wasn't a big question mark. Goal-scoring striker, Chicago, Kansas City, Orlando, it's a big question. You get Alan Pulido, you answer the question.
I was going to wonder if there's anyone who hasn't been linked to Alan Pulido recently.
The rest of the league.
The Whitecaps.
Yeah, he's not going to Vancouver.
No.
4 teams linked to him, and Chicago would be the one that feels like the one that could throw the most at him and needs to throw the most at him, and he could have the biggest impact in. I think it makes the most sense. Another forward in the league from Chivas, and I think the Pulido deal will affect what happens with Jose Juan Macias. He was on loan to León. Looks like León's not going to be able to keep him, although they're still trying. Reportedly has drawn interest from LAFC, but he could go back to Guadalajara, and this is one where I think you have to follow the dominoes. If Chivas sells Pulido, they're not going to also sell Macias. He comes in and he plays the games that Pulido did in Guadalajara. If they don't sell Pulido, could they go ahead and move on from Macias? You're going to have to get a lot of money for him. He's valued at more than Pulido. He's valued at 5.7, mainly due to the fact he's younger, and due to the fact that most people think he's going to end up playing in Europe. It sounds like he doesn't want to go to MLS yet. He wants to go to Europe from Chivas. And if Pulido is sold, then that makes a lot of sense. If you don't sell Pulido, do you go ahead and cash in on a bigger chip if you're Guadalajara, but maybe not get the maximum value that you could get if you hold on? I think what happens is Pulido gets sold, Macias starts for Chivas next year, and then he gets sold in a year's time to Europe, or maybe even next summer, and you get more money overall long-term than you would have if you do it the other way around. So I don't expect Macias in MLS. Just not seeing it.
Anybody else on the board?
Oh, yeah, there's a few. Brian Lozano, who had a golazo last night for Santos.
Yeah, that's
9
pretty
goals,
ridiculous.
7 assists in the Apertura. He's the one that is linked to LAFC. $12 million offer reportedly. It doesn't make sense to me because, one, you'd have to do that if you sell Diego Rossi. That part makes sense. But you already have Brian Rodriguez. So if you're doing that, if you go get Lozano and you have Rodriguez and you have Vela, you're playing the 3 of them, and that means Vela's playing as a number 9. That means Diamande is on the bench or out. I don't think you get better that way. I don't think Vela is as effective. I think you lose effectiveness with him as a 9. I don't know if you get better with that trio up front than you do if you just go get a number 9 if you're not happy with Diamande and play Rodriguez and Vela on either side of the number 9, or if you just drop in Rodriguez for Rossi and keep Diamande. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out, but I just don't know about this one. I think he's an incredibly talented player, and you spend $12 million for him, I think you're going to get your money's worth. But I don't know if he's a fit in LA. I don't know how this works out for LAFC, and I wonder if they're going to maybe get a little bit blinded by, oh, he's really good, let's get him, and maybe not make their team better with this kind of move. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on LAFC. Orlando, if they don't get Pulido, they are now linked to a striker that we've talked about in the past, Germán Cano from Independiente Medellin. He's 31. He's reportedly out of contract at the end of the calendar year. 20 goals in 19 matches in the first phase of the Colombian season. RSL put in an offer for him last year. We talked about him with Felipe Cárdenas. He's a player who would be good in this league. And I think he'd be very good for Orlando, and he would cost them a whole lot less than Pulido would. So you don't get Pulido, you get Cano. I still think Orlando's a better team with him in it. Orlando's also linked to the young defensive midfielder from Atlético Nacional that we talked about last week, Andrés Perea. He was born in Tampa, so he's not going to count as an international player. TV program in Colombia, Gente, Pasión y Fútbol, is saying that Orlando has made a considerable offer for 50% of his rights. Flamengo made an offer, but it wasn't as strong as what Orlando offered. So, the fact that he's not going to count as an international makes a ton of sense. But you just brought back Uri Rosell, so, are you going to be able to make it work with Rosell, Perea, and Sebastian Mendez? I don't know. I don't know how that looks. I mean, unless you're just going to ease Perea in and you're not going to count on him to start a whole lot, or Rosell becomes more of a depth piece. I don't know. That's my question about it. But, yeah, going out to get him if you're a team in MLS, and specifically if you're Orlando, I get it. Dallas is linked to 2 different players from Palmeiras. Palmeiras is about to really remake their team, so they're trying to offload guys who haven't quite cut it for them, and 2 of them are linked to Dallas. Diego Santos, who's 30 years old, central midfielder, played about half of Palmeiras' games this season. The other one is Rafael Vega. Vega is valued a little bit higher. He's 24 years old. He can play anywhere in the midfield, centrally or out on the wing. Played a lot as a number 10. The combined amount for both players in the Brazilian media is $5.5 million. You have so many young players if you're Dallas, but if you make the decision that you've got some young guys that you'd rather have play consistently with North Texas than sit on the bench with Dallas, and these guys become players that sit on the bench or push for consistent playing time, it makes sense. And that's not crazy money for 2 players that are good pieces. So it makes some sense for Dallas, but I wonder if you get them both and how you pull that off. Nashville's linked to a center back, Daniel Maldonado from Honduras. He plays for Motagua. He can play on the right side as well. He's got 4 caps on the senior level. He's 21 years old. Feels like the kind of signing that Nashville needs to make to bolster where they're at currently. You've got rumors of River Plate's Ignacio Fernandez, valued at just over $9 million, headed to the LA Galaxy. I don't know how that one's going to work. Mauro Zarate of Boca Juniors has been linked to the Galaxy, as well as just a general MLS move. He's valued at $3.4 million. He's 32. He's been very good, but he hasn't been a regular starter, and he wants more playing time. Zarate, I think you can really get good value for him for some teams. Ignacio Fernandez, I don't know if that's where they need to spend their designated player money if you're the Galaxy, unless they don't bring back Alessandrini and they go get a forward along with Fernandez. Okay, you still have to find somebody to play defense for you if you're the LA Galaxy. So I don't know. The other 2 that are big that you have to keep an eye on, before we go. Chicharito talked to the LA Times' Kevin Baxter and was asked about MLS. He said, when asked if he had thought about it, he said, yes, definitely. Look, I am always thinking about my future. I want to be as open as I can to any opportunity. MLS is a league that is improving. It is an opportunity. Every league is an opportunity. That's opening a door. And if you are the LA Galaxy, if you are Chicago Fire, those are two that have designated player spots open that need strikers. And, yes, Chicago's been linked to Pulido, but if you feel like you could get Chicharito from Sevilla, who hasn't been playing on a regular basis for them, but he's been playing, he reportedly making just over $3 million a year at Sevilla. You've had MLS teams pay a whole lot more than that for designated players, so I think you can make that part work, make it worth his while. Transfer fee you're going to have to pay, I don't know. This is the weird one. Sevilla is usually pretty good in the market, but this is an older player. Like, are you going to get more than $5 to $10 million for him? If you're an MLS team and you can get Chicharito for $5 million a year salary and pay $8 million in a transfer fee, you're going to make your money back. Mm-hmm. You're going to make your money back in terms of interest, in terms of marketing, in terms of jersey sales. It's worth it. And for Chicago or the LA Galaxy, it's really worth it. So I think he ends up in MLS in the next year. I do. I think another one who should end up in MLS is Mario Balotelli. And the reason why, we've talked about it from a lot of different reasons, but the reason why is now you've got the president of Brescia saying that he can leave on a free in January. Go get him. Done. He can leave on a free. Go get him. Pay him. If you're paying him, I don't know what his salary is at Brescia, but if you're paying him $3, $4, $5 million a year, you're going to get headlines. You're going to get craziness. You're going to get all kinds of that. And if you're ready to deal with it, go do it. And for me, Montreal's the one that makes the most sense. They need a forward. They need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net. I think Balotelli would. You would like to think that Thierry Henry could get the most out of him. I think it makes a ton of sense. My number 2 would be Miami. And part of that is because if it's Patrick Vieira as the manager, it's another manager that has been through a lot of the stuff that Balotelli's been through. You go get a guy like that, you pair them up with a manager like Vieira or like Henry, and you would like to think you could get the best out of that player. And if you get him on a free, done. And both of those teams need a goal-scoring number 9, a big figure. Balotelli's your superstar for Miami. It's not a bad place to start from. Montreal, it gets you headlines. It gets you interest. It's not a bad place to start from. So those are 2 bigger names that haven't been linked to specific teams. I think both should be in MLS in 2020 at some point.
Yeah, and after seeing what was said by the president of Brescia, I'm just like, look, go get him. Yeah, go get him, and I'd love to see him here, and I'd love to see where he lands.
I think Montreal is the one that should, and Montreal could make that work. I think they really could, and get the most out of him. That's what would make the most sense for everybody, is for Mario Balotelli to be wearing a Montreal kit. Anything else on the Twitters before we go?
Jeff Reuter from Minnesota United. He's hearing that they have made an offer to Vito Mannone, which would make him MLS's highest paid goalkeeper in 2020, eclipsing the Brad Guzan wage deal. To clarify, Jeff says being MLS's highest paid goalkeeper would make that player a TAM signing, not necessarily a DP.
Yeah, okay, just to clarify, 'cause this is where terminology can really mess people up. If you're a TAM signing, you are technically a designated player until you're bought down. Like, keep that in mind. So, for example, Minnesota, if they have an open designated player spot and they sign Vito Mannone to $1 million a year, you don't have to buy him down until you want another designated player, and then you buy him down. It sounds like semantics, but like it's very important in the way you build. And Seattle's done a really good job of this, where they've had guys sit in designated player spots, and they haven't used TAM or GAM until they had to buy a player down, because then they want to add somebody to a designated player spot. There's no point in buying a player down until you have to, if you have an open DP spot. So it doesn't matter, really. Like, if if you have the open DP spot and you're not going to use it, then just have him in the designated player slot and save your allocation money. You might use it in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a really important distinction. I think at times we get into whether they're a TAM or they're a designated player. If they're over that maximum player salary that MLS has set at $530,000, they are a designated player until they are bought down, period. And Minnesota can make that decision when it comes to it. We went through their roster. Like it's not like Minnesota has to go make a designated player big signing. If they go out and sign Manone to that deal and there's not another player that they want to bring in that would be more important to have in a designated player spot, then cool, there you go. That's fine. They need a goalkeeper. That's the number one thing. I think that is the most important thing for Minnesota. If you don't have the goalkeeper, there's no way you're matching what you did last year.
Nope.
Then you have to get somebody to put the ball in the back of the net. That could be Mason Toye, but you're going to have to ask him to jump up higher, or it means you go out and get somebody. But you got to have the goalkeeper. And if you're happy with Manone, and you should be after what he gave you last year, yeah, that's the kind of offer that makes sense.
And that was last one in the queue for rumors for the morning.
That's the last one in the queue, period, because we're 30 minutes over, because it's been one of those days with the MLS decision on the roster or on the schedule. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. We will talk more about rumors and questions and teams and where things look for MLS as we get deeper into silly season. Don't forget about Wednesday night at Reformation Brewing in Canton. Michael Parkhurst hanging out with us, probably for a good bit of time, talking to us about his career, about his time here in Atlanta, about what's next. Really looking forward to it. We've had a lot of people from our friends with Cherokee Soccer Association RSVP for this. If you want to get out to Canton for this, I know Canton's a haul, but for some of you, it's a lot closer than some of our other events have been. If you want to get out for this, get there early. Get a parking spot. Get there early. Get a spot where you want to hang out in the venue. It's a very cool spot, but get there early because it's expected to be quite a crowd. So, put that down in your calendar. We will see you on Wednesday night. Let us know if you want a scarf. Sean Vergara has requested a scarf. His scarf will be hitting the mail here in just a bit. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for supporting the show. If you want to support the show, send us a message. We'll get your scarf out in the mail, or we will see you in Canton, or we will see you tonight at the Brewhouse Cafe in Little 5 Points for Soccer over there. Nick Alifi has returned from Italy. We will hear all about his tales. We will talk about all the craziness with the managerial carousel that has started spinning very, very fast in Europe. And that could have some effect on MLS. We'll get into all that tonight on Soccer Over There, 6 o'clock. We'll see you at the Brewhouse Cafe. If we don't see you, you'll be listening, and we'll be talking to you then. Thanks, everybody. Mucho platiel.
Mucho platiel.